Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be invited to talk to you here today. Almost 40 years ago, in January 1972, I was a student at the British National Film School, and I suggested making a film about Northern Ireland. Being a first-year student, I had come up with a crazy plan to film two families, one Catholic, the other Protestant, separated by a quarter of a mile of tribal hatred. Our format, as of course we would now call it, although we didn't know the word then, was that we would film the two families in three different ways. The first would be observational. The second phase was what we called in those days agitprop. And the third phase was to take both families to the edit suite so they could see how the films were turning out and to be filmed in discussion with each other. I suppose you'd call that reconciliation. I learned much more about the conflict in Northern Ireland through the culture of these two working class families living a quarter of a mile apart in identical houses than I did from all the news bulletins. In the end, we made all this into a 2-hour film, and I suppose had we known what we know now, we would have called it by a format, reality drama, or some other newfangled term. Just after I finished this film in 1974, a German production company called Filmpool started in Cologne. 37 years after it was set up, i.e. now, today, Filmpool's scripted entertainment department, or as they call it, real fiction, will break the barrier of producing 1,000 hours of original programming in this genre in 2011. Meanwhile, over in England, up in Liverpool, from totally different origins, another strand of real drama was beginning in Lime Pictures under creative director Tony Wood. With their expertise in youth and children's drama, Tony had become interested in American dramality, such as The Hills, and had produced for MTV an English series called Living on the Edge. Interestingly, Tony and Lime style is totally different from Stefan's team in Cologne. In Cologne, the stories are fully scripted, but look like actuality, real documentary, whereas in Britain, Tony's method is unscripted, but looks like drama, with highly stylized lighting and very intimate close-ups. Meanwhile, seeing what Tony Wood was doing in England, I asked him to pair up with Ruth Wrigley, who's a senior entertainment executive producer at All3Media. So now we had another hybrid, the dramatist and the entertainer. I believe the model, the federal devolved model we employ, which encourages creative diversity in 20 different companies and their 30 different creative centers, has more chance of bubbling up this kind of fertility than a more integrated one-company top-down approach.
What's the benefit and what's the hardest part of letting the satellite operations build their own creativity but manage it from the center?
Well, the great asset of it is that you get many more ideas, and there's a lot of new creativity going on around the group. The difficulty is how do you harness it? So Ruth Wrigley that I mentioned, who's here tonight, sits looking across the whole group's formats with Wayne, who's looking at their potential for international production. And we've got a digital media director called Andy Taylor, who's looking at every idea to see what's the multimedia potential in this. Ruth then runs something called the Rolling Top 10, which is her very personal view of what she thinks are the biggest ideas or the most interesting, attractive, internationally capable ideas of the 500, which is quite a task. And those ideas are lifted up by her and Wayne and positioned, discussed with All3 International to see how should we export them from country to country, shared with our companies in different countries so that they know what's been developed before it even reaches the screen, so that they can prepare their way of doing it. So you might get an undercover boss made in English, in American, in German, in Dutch, in Australia, etc. But those companies will know about these ideas as they're bubbling up before they actually get transmitted.
How does that feed back down the pipeline to you, Stefan? Are you aware that you're playing as part of a team, and how does that inform your own development process locally?
I think the good thing about how we work is that it's always a two-way street. So we have regular catch-ups, regular calls. There's a constant exchange of ideas. Steve mentioned Ruth. There's Stephanie Hartog also, who is in charge of formats. So I think that the interesting thing is really it works in two ways. We get inspiration, what the other companies are doing. I hope we do inspire in what we are doing. And I think in that way it's a very good process, not just looking at the UK and Germany, but also at the other territories.
So what's on the rolling top 10, Wayne?
I couldn't possibly tell you.
It's a secret.
It's a secret. I mean, I just want to come back to one of the things Steve was strangely modest there, which is a great gift, because he came up with a model, or he understands what creative people like. And if you look at the All3 model, this absolutely works for creative people. On the one hand, you do get absolute financial rigor, which is why the group works so well. But it's the creative freedom of which people respond to. And that's why he's built something rather unique, and why people stay with the Federation.
How do you develop this constructed reality genre for the US? What moves are afoot, or what things do you need to do to take it there?
Well, I think what's quite interesting, because there have been some examples of this programming in America, The Hills people talks about, but if we just take Essex at the moment, I think Essex is different because it's an entertainment piece. Actually, its comedy is at the heart of what it does. And secondly, it's very immediate. So they're filming while the show is on air, and that is completely different to the way these shows are normally constructed. But what that also does is it gives you a wonderful opportunity digitally to actually increase the audience's appetite for the content that's linked to it.
Where are the sweet spots, sale, no sale, refinance or not, to build a global production brand? Is it branded entertainment? Is it social media? Is it retaining your executives and inspiring them to develop the next big thing? Where are you sort of putting your value over the next few years?
The real issue is, what's the right route and the right partner to go to the next stage of growth? And it will be to become a more global company. Now, that doesn't matter if you haven't got ideas. Ideas is the currency of what we're all doing. And therefore, when we started out, we chose deliberately this model, a rather decentralized, coat of many colors model. Companies, as you mentioned, with executives who are all very different, had their own style, had their own creative tone in what they did. So I think the secret here is diversity, versatility. The secret is lots of ideas, lots of different executives, all feeling they're in their own companies, but harbored by a bigger group. A situation where you get freedom, but you also get support. And I think that is the management model of All3, and we should continue that and grow that more globally.